everybody, this is Hannah, and this video is inspired by the fact that I got to shadow a Hoofcare provider for a couple of days last week, and it really inspired me to make a video about the things that horse owners can do to make their Hoofcare provider's job easier. So this video is going to be 7 tips for making Hoofcare more pleasant for you, your horse, and of course your Hoofcare provider. It seems like everywhere I go and everyone I speak to, you know, their trimmer or farrier is booked, not taking new clients, or they're trying to reduce their client load they already have, or they're just crazy busy. So the easier we can make it on them, the better it is for everybody. So step 1 is to find the Hoofcare provider that works for you and works for your horse. So I know it can be daunting. There are a lot of providers out there. You know, sometimes you don't have access to as many in one location as you would in another, but if you have a young horse or an old horse, or maybe a horse that's recovering from an injury, you know, you might need to find someone who's willing to take the time and be really patient and understand that your horse might need more breaks or would take a little bit more time. So definitely talk to potential providers. You know, find somebody who's really going to take the time if your horse needs extra time. That's not to say that it's not our responsibility to train our horses. We'll get to that in a second. But do your homework, find a provider that's going to work with you and the horse you have. Step 2 is to consider pain and asymmetry in your horse. So especially if your horse is normally really good for your Hoofcare provider and they start having problems all of a sudden, that's really important information. A lot of times our horses can be sensitive in their feet for so many different reasons. Or if your horse has asymmetry in their body, it can mean that it's physically more difficult for them to pick up one of their feet and hold it up for a long time. So when we're talking about tending to their feet, it's really important to consider those things, because your horse might be in pain, or they might have something else going on in their body that's making it physically hard for them. So that's step number 2. Always consider those things when your horse is struggling with picking up their feet. Step 3 is to teach your horse to stand still. This seems really simple, but it's really underrated, and it's especially important when it comes to Hoofcare. If your horse isn't comfortable standing still, then it's going to be a million times harder for them to pick up one of their feet and balance on the other 3 feet and keep it up for a long time, and all of those things that they have to do. So you need to start with a horse that's comfortable and relaxed standing still. Step 4 is to make sure that your horse is well balanced, and a lot of horses that I see could use more work on this point alone. It takes a lot of balance and self-awareness for the horse to be able to give you one of their feet freely and balance on the other 3, and I think sometimes we take this for granted, but if your horse struggles with this, then a lot of subtle balancing exercises can be really helpful. Now, Rumba here has had her feet handled for years. She's really good about it, but I'll show you what I mean. So when I first start asking a horse to pick up their feet, I want to make sure that first they're standing in a way that they can actually give me the foot that I want. So if I wanted to pick up her left front foot, I wouldn't ask when she's standing like this, because I'm just inviting her to lose her balance. So I'm going to back her up a step so that she can get a little bit more. There, that's better, right? So I want to make sure she's standing in a good spot, and then I want to make sure that when I cue her, and everybody has a different cue for picking up their feet, but whatever your cue is, like right here, I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on her chestnut. I want to make sure the first thing that happens is that she takes her weight off that foot. So this is great for like horses that are just learning to pick up their feet, and even some that have some trouble. There. It was subtle, but you can see, I'll do it again, you can see her rock her weight off that foot. There, good. And in the beginning, that's all I want. I just want to make sure that she can rebalance herself. And even there, you actually could see that she couldn't do it without moving a hind foot also. So, just really little things to play around with that will help your horse balance up really well and get used to taking the weight on those other 3 feet. So if I wanted to pick up her foot again, I might step her forward a little bit. Good. There. Good. And then a step back. I'm just going to take the time to make sure that I'm putting her in a position to where it's fair of me to ask her to pick up her foot, because otherwise it's not fair. If she's going to fall on her face, then I'm not asking a question that she can give me a good answer to. So again, just teach your horse that when you give them that cue, the first step is that they balance themselves in their other 3 feet. Then you can get on to picking it up and holding it up and all those other things. But the most important thing is that they know how to balance. Tip 5 is to do some body work. Hi. If your horse gets regular body work, that's awesome. It can really help make your hoof care provider's job easier because they're dealing with a horse that can have a little bit more range of motion, that is well balanced, all of these things that's going to make their job a lot easier. If you want to experiment with some body work yourself, you can totally YouTube some videos on like very basic massage techniques. You could pick up the Masterson Method book. It's super reasonable and has a bunch of different techniques in there. And you might play around, like especially if your horse has trouble balancing while getting hoof care, you might play around with some of those techniques like right before and just see if it helps relax them, even them out, make it a little bit easier for them during their appointment. So tip number 6 is that you're going to want to practice, right? Your hoof care provider is coming hopefully every 4 to 6 weeks, and if you did something once every 4 to 6 weeks, you would not expect any change in that thing. As owners and trainers, it's our job to teach our horses how to do these things. It is not your trimmer or farrier's job to train your horse. And so find minutes of your day when you're just managing your horses or when you're feeding or doing all the things that we have to do with them anyway. And if your horse has trouble, just fold it into your daily routine, even 2 or 3 times a week. If you can pick up a foot here or play with their balance there, do something that's going to just implement it into their routine. Anything else that we do with horses, of course, like once every 4 to 6 weeks is not often enough to see change. So find the things that work for you, find the things that are effective for your horse, and practice those things in between. You know, that can go a long way towards keeping a good relationship with your trimmer or your farrier. And my last tip, tip number 7, is to consider using positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement can be really strong, especially when you need results in a short time. One of the problems that I think about is, you know, if a horse has a bad experience during a trim, then it's only 4 to 6 weeks that you have to kind of change their minds about that before the next one kind of has to happen. So positive reinforcement is a great tool when used correctly. It is actually easy to misuse positive reinforcement. So if you're interested in positive reinforcement, I cannot recommend enough. Get a trainer or a professional that specializes in it to do at least a few lessons with you, get you headed in the right direction, so that you can just have some guidance, because I think a lot of times positive reinforcement gets a bad rap because it's not used ideally. So it can be an awesome tool, especially for horses that have had trauma around their feet or just don't know anything about feet yet. But make sure that you go about it the right way, and getting a few lessons with a professional is always recommended. So yeah, those are my 7 tips for keeping a good relationship with your trimmer or farrier. They're all busy, they're all overworked, their job is really hard even if the horse is being good. So let's do everything we can to make it easier.